Hi everyone, today I'm going to teach you how to revise your Buddhism DBQ response. So let's go ahead and just letting you know that what part of the quiz was graded was the 10-point summative page 2. So page 1 was the evidence, the textual evidence that you use for page 2. So if that confused you at all, the first page is not graded. It's the second page with these is that part that was graded. So I'm going to be going over the major errors that students made. And so I'm spending a whole entire day, right, talking about revising the Buddhism DBQ because it's that important. So we'll be going through this, and you can also find this on page 3 of the number 14 handout in case you want to revisit the errors. So, as a reminder, let's remind ourselves of the prompt. How did Buddhism create a path for women to liberate or free themselves from Indian patriarchy / sexism? That sounds really fancy. If we put that simply, the prompt is asking, how did Buddhism help women free themselves from the control of men? All right? And so that is the main question that we're trying to answer in this quiz. So in order for you to really understand this, I wanted to provide a little bit more context about what life was like for Indian women back then. So in traditional Indian families, you might not know this, parents would arrange a marriage for their children. Women would live with her husband, his parents, and all their kids under one roof or extended family. So something interesting to note is that men and women, if they wanted to get married, it really wasn't necessarily their choice as much as it was the parents' choice. And the parents would choose, their daughter or son's spouse based on who they thought had the best social status, maybe who was like very attractive, who had like a lot of money or something like that. These are considerations that every Indian family would consider before deciding whether two people should get married. And I just wanted to show you what a kitchen of a rural Indian woman looks like even today. So as you can see, it's not looking the most luxurious, like most, people, if they're rural or poorer, they won't have like a luxurious kitchen. And women spend a lot of time in the kitchen, right? Our textbook cited a primary source, the laws of Manu, to show us how Indian women were expected to behave. So please don't forget that. This is on page 1. And if you see what I highlighted here, right, it talks about how a woman basically needs to be dependent on her husband or her father or her sons, that she always needed to be dependent on a man, and that she also had to serve her husband like a god. So it wasn't an equal relationship. So that is what Indian women at the time were dealing with. But please know that the responsibilities of the bhikkhunis were different. So bhikkhunis were Buddhist nuns, and nuns are members of a religious community of women, and they live in poverty, like they're not allowed to get super rich, chastity, which means they don't, have sexual relations with anybody, and they need to devote all their time to their religion because that's why they're there. And where do they live? They live in monasteries, right? Bhikkhunis live in monasteries. And so the Bhikkhunis wrote the Psalms of the Sisters. The poem was from the Psalms. And a psalm is a sacred song or poem. So please know that you only read one poem. There were many poems that these sisters wrote. And they're not actual sisters, right? They're not actually related. But that's what they call a group of nuns. They're called sisters. So you only read one poem from it. Yeah, there you go. And here is a connection. These are Catholic nuns, okay? So you can see an example. And if you've ever seen Sister Act 1 or 2, in the movie, the main character's boyfriend killed someone. So she hid in a convent and as Sister Mary Clarence. So this is what Catholic nuns would go to live in a convent in America. So it's just kind of interesting that a convent tends to be a great place to escape violent men, to be honest. So a lot of times, right, women would seek religion as a way to get away from a patriarchal society, especially if they had male family members that might have been abusive or just really disrespectful to them. But please realize that this was a hard choice for a woman to make. A Buddhist woman had two main choices, right? If she could stay in Hindu society where husbands have ultimate power and her purpose will be to support her family. Or you could choose B, never start a family, but live for yourself. So please realize that this was not an easy choice for women. And I want you to think, if you were a woman back then, which option would you choose and why? Would you choose A, to basically live with a husband and have to support your whole family, or never start a family but live for yourself? Like for me, I actually would, as long as my husband wasn't abusive, I would probably rather choose A, because I would be sad if I never got to start my own family or never see my family again, because that's what Buddhist monks had to deal with, right? They wouldn't really live with their family anymore. Sorry about that. And so I also want to show you some examples from students' responses, and some of them had errors in them. Please know if your writing was selected, it's okay, it's completely anonymous, and never feel bad. Clearly, other students made the same mistakes, and we all have things we need to improve on. So here is the first error two students made a lot: not understanding or explaining that only a few Indian women could or would choose to become a bhikkhuni due to the requirement of giving up one's family. And so I was seeing this issue, right, where people are like talking about women in ancient India were restricted. People usually got that question. But when it came to providing context about, Buddha taught that women could reach enlightenment, a lot of times they would not explain, mention that Buddha allowed women to become bhikkhunis and live separately from men. So that needs to be incorporated in some way. So for example, this writer writes, right, Buddha taught that women could reach enlightenment, so Buddhist women were allowed to write about their own experiences with the rights of a religious woman. This gave them more freedom because instead of men writing a book for them, the women were able to reveal how they felt about their own experiences, and this led to more freedom. I love this part because he provides an excellent link to their claim, but the issue is that never in this does the person talk about bhikkhunis, right? And how if you become a Buddhist nun, you give up your family and you don't have to work for your husband anymore, right? Because you're actually separated from your family. So please make sure you add that in somewhere. Something about, like, if you didn't mention a bhikkhuni, please mention them. All right, here is another issue, is when we use a short quote from the poem without summarizing the woman's full story. So here's an example from a student. For example, in a poem, Psalms of the Sisters, one bhikkhuni wrote, "O woman, well set free, how free am I? How thoroughly free from kitchen drudgery. My brutal husband had me stained, filthed me among my cooking pots." This revealed that she finally feels free and independent, that she doesn't have to be with a man for the rest of her life. What I like about this so far is that they've analyzed the quote, right? They gave a quote, but they always explained how the quote reveals that she finally felt free. And so that's linking back to this freedom claim. However, let's keep reading. So this poem demonstrates that she finally felt free and independent by not being with her brutal husband. I love that he quoted that. This shows that this religion made women feel free and happy. So this is good. But the issue that I have is that they're claiming, right, the Buddhist nuns were more free without explaining what specifically these women were free to do at the monastery. So a lot of y'all basically said, oh, these Buddhist women feel free now. Woohoo, she doesn't have to be working for her husband anymore. But if she's not working for her husband, then what is she doing? Tell us how these Buddhist women are spending their time and how that liberates them, okay? So let's look at the next part. So if we actually use evidence from the whole poem, we'll start seeing how women spent their time liberating themselves. So like a lot of y'all used the first stanza where basically it talked about her brutal husband making her cook all the time. But a lot of you didn't actually mention like a quote from the second part of the stanza. Like this part I really like. "I am purged now of all my former lust and hate. Calm and content I know Buddha's peace. I dwell meditating at ease beneath the shade of spreading branches." So this is her freedom. So you have to talk about the other half of her life. Now that she's a Buddhist, right, she's feeling calm, but why? So just remember what she's free to do in the monastery. So you can feel free to pause the video at some point, but the things that women did when they went to the monastery were, one, they could write about their lives, and two, they could seek self-enlightenment. So those were the two main things Buddhist nuns did in this monastery. Please notice, though, that they didn't actually have much power outside the monastery, right? So they were only had power in this little tiny community. If they were to go back into Indian society, right, they have no place there anymore, which is really interesting. So the only way a woman could have power over herself in Indian times was if she sacrificed her family life and completely kind of lives in seclusion by herself with a community of other nuns. Something interesting to note. All right. So another issue that I saw in people's texts is students were missing an opportunity to explain how Buddhist goals freed women from their personal suffering. So as a reminder, to summarize what Buddhism is, Buddhists think that the cause of suffering is desire, wanting more than what you actually have. Wanting people, wanting things, wanting like achievements, like getting a amazing job or going to like the best college ever. These things cause us suffering. Therefore, the goal of Buddhism is to limit your desires and meditate to achieve nirvana or enlightenment, which is inner peace in this life. So what I wanted to see is people mentioning like not just that women were being liberated from men, right? Men are not the only things that are causing these women suffering. According to Buddhism, we women cause our own suffering as well with our desires. And bhikkhunis learn to control their desires through meditation. So if you had mentioned anything like a woman focusing on meditation to achieve inner peace, that is kind of what I wanted you to add to your writing. So if you did not mention anything about the middle path or nirvana, or meditation, I would have liked to seen that in your piece, and you can revise that. Okay, last problem, which we'll get to, but number 6, connecting to other patriarchies. So you're supposed to finish the sentence starter. The Psalms of the Sisters is an important text to learn about in world history because, and explain. So just telling you what this is called contextualizing. And contextualization is a historical skill that involves the ability to connect historical events and processes to specific circumstances of the time and place, as well as the broader regional, national, or global process. To explain, in simple terms, all I wanted you to answer is, why was Psalms of the Sisters revolutionary for that time period? So you can make this as your sentence starter. Because back in ancient times, who wrote most of the texts? And we already said this from paragraph 2, right, of the reading. The Psalms of the Sisters represents the only early text in any of the world's major religions that was written by women about the religious experiences of women, okay? So you should have mentioned something like that, but in your own words, no quoting, no direct quotes. Put it in your own words. Why is Psalms of the Sisters such an important revolutionary text, okay? And then the last step would be, if you want to challenge yourself, is to answer in your quiz. Why is it important for people today to know about these ancient texts and learn about these ancient texts of these Buddhist women? Why is it important for us to have learned this, okay? And once you have all those aspects, then you would revise the quiz. And once you finish revising and you resubmit the quiz, you can come back to the main room and privately chat the teacher that you're done, and the teacher will dismiss you, okay? So that's the next step. If you are not able to finish revising your quiz by the end of class time, then please make sure you do it by 8 a.m. tomorrow as homework, okay? Have a wonderful day and work on revising your quiz. Bye.